It's 2021. Modern Street Fighter games should be getting balance updates more than once or twice a year. Plus, 4 reasons why you're losing in Street Fighter V and the top 10 best alternate costumes in SF5, all on this week's episode of the Event Hubs podcast.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Event Hubs podcast. I am John Catalyst Gray, and with me as always is John Velociraptor Guerrero.
How's it going today?
It is going pretty darn decently. A lot of ups and downs in the personal life, but I'm coming in, man. I'm ready to do the show. Talked about Street Fighter is like pretty much what makes me tick. So yeah,
I had an interesting ups and downs kind of last few days. Actually, it was Friday. I want to share this. And I want to share this specifically with the audio listeners because I don't think this will make it onto any of the YouTube videos. But hey, audio listeners, you're getting bonus content right now. My adventures with Ojos Locos. My fiance Brittany and I on Friday night after I finished work decided for whatever reason she's like, I want to go to Red Robin, which is completely unlike her because she doesn't like, she only likes really locally owned stuff to begin with. But she's like, I want to go to Red Robin, and there's one maybe 6 or 7 minutes up the freeway. And so I got into the Red Robin mindset, and decided I really wanted some mozzarella sticks, and was like, all right, let's go, because you kind of, you got to get in the Red Robin mindset. You can't just go to these places. They're not that great. And by the way, like
Red Robin, please sponsor the show.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, well, right after this one. You know how like there used to be Chili's and TGI Fridays and Applebee's like everywhere, and there was like sort of a fad for them? Well, and then people realized that they sucked and they were all the same thing and they're generic and soulless and everything's out of a bag from the back and they throw it in the microwave. And so they all kind of died for the most part. Red Robin was just waiting in like the rafters, and they came in after all of the death of Chili's and Applebee's and all that stuff, and they just collected the remaining people that would still go there, and that's what's at Red Robin now. So we go in there, and it's just like everybody took their screaming kids on Friday night to dinner, and they seat us in the middle of the entire restaurant at this table made for at least 6 people, and it's just the 2 of us, and it's super loud, and there's kids running all over the place and throwing onion rings and stuff. And we sit down for like 10 seconds, and Brittany goes, I don't want to do this. Let's go. So all of this prep for Red Robin that I've been doing, it goes out the window. I'm not getting my mozzarella sticks. And we go out, and in the parking lot, it's this big kind of like, mall area parking lot. There's this place that just opened called Ojos Locos. And we go, let's go to Ojos Locos. It looks cool. It's like some kind of a sports bar. We're not sure what it is. And so we walk, and it's maybe a good 200 yards down. So we have this nice little stroll through the desert parking lot. And as we get there, there's like 1,000 cars in the parking lot of Ojos Locos. And we're like, what's going on? I mean, Red Robin was reasonably busy, but like not 1,000 cars in the parking lot busy. Glad we walked because we wouldn't have had a place to park. So we get up to the front, and we're like, what exactly is this place? And there's these 2 security guards out in the front, which at first I didn't even realize if they were guarding the door. But as I approached, they looked at me they were not inviting. They were just total suspicion. They look at me and they go, ID, and then so I give them my ID, and then they say turn around and they pat me down. I'm like, what is this place? I thought this was like a famous Sam's or something like that. They only asked Brittany for her ID. She gives it to them, and we go inside, and it's this huge, loud. By the way, it's in the middle of the playoffs. So that was the Suns and it was at the Lakers. I think the Jazz. The Jazz. Anyways, it's that.
Well, you're pissing off all the NBA fans right now and stuff. So, because the Jazz are playing the Clippers, and then the Suns just beat someone else, and they advanced to the Western Conference.
Right. So Shooty Hoops was going on, and
basketball's
there was
a big deal. I love it. So yeah.
so there's just a million people in here. It's really loud. It's really bright. There are these giant beer bongs on every table, where like basically it's the table's own tap, but it's this giant beer bong, and all of the servers are young girls dressed in basically lingerie. They all have black lingerie on. It was Hooters, but like for the bottom half, basically. And so we're like, I come into this place and I turn around and like, Brittany, we probably don't want to be here. And she's like, we're here and I want to eat. And oh, well, whatever, we're committed. So they sit us down, and they seat us in the very corner of the restaurant, farthest away from the middle of it. And Ojos Locos was an experience where it was really loud, shooty hoop stuff, butts everywhere. I'm not a dad yet, but my dad senses were going off everywhere, like, put some clothes on these girls and stuff. And It was very, very different from a Red Robin Friday night. So that was my adventure to Ojos Locos. I don't know that we'll ever be going back, but we went once, and that's enough to last a lifetime. So
Wow. Yeah, that's I mean, I know what we're doing for your wedding and stuff when we go out
yeah,
there.
yeah, we'll go to dude's brunch.
Oh, that's gonna be awkward.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I didn't even know that existed, but now it makes sense. Like the security guard being like, you know, usually you want customers to come in the door and stuff like that, but you and I both know some people can get pretty rowdy at those kind of places.
Yeah.
So they're double checking and seeing like, hey, are you on our banned list, basically? So
By the way, I got a chicken sandwich, a buffalo chicken sandwich. It was pretty good. It was like a 6.5, maybe a 7 out of 10. So halfway decent. Oh, and our server, she was like maybe 20, and she didn't know what Shiner Bock was, even though that was on their list of beers and everything. She was not a very well informed server. For some reason, something tells me that she doesn't make her money based on her knowledge of the menu. But
all right, now I have to ask you, John, how well did you tip her?
like 20%.
Oh, okay. So you did pretty good. Yeah. So John used to work at Red Lobster.
Oh yeah.
And when he talks about like all like, you know, the Red Robins and other stuff like that, he's not BSing. He worked in one of these places and he knows like
I worked in a couple of these places, and they are devoid of all life and soul in the background for sure. So
speaking of devoid of all life and soul, let's talk about Street Fighter 5.
oh, okay, so that's not a good transition there. I'm going to call you out right away because I think the game is in a really good place, and I think it's got there over the course of 5 years, and I think that it could have gotten there faster if we updated the damn thing more often. And I understand that we come from a place, and when I say we, I mean fighting games and the fighting game community. There's a lot of trepidation about overbalancing, right? And the whole Mortal Kombat X thing and all that stuff. Okay, I get it. That's established. And let's begin at the beginning of all of this. I think fighting games, and more specifically Street Fighter, sort of did what almost all games do now with their regular updates from the start. They were doing this 30 years ago with Street Fighter 2, right? Because there was 2 and the Champion Edition, World Warrior Champion Edition, Super Turbo, all that stuff. And I mean, back in that time, it took about a year, and sometimes it was more than once a year, but they would change and they would detail these games and make little adjustments, because fighting games, if they're played, you know, in the competitive sense and how Street Fighter has come to be played and has been for a very long time, we care about the minute details, we care about frames, and we're constantly tweaking and altering to make the experience better. That's something now that most genres, I feel like, do because of the modern age and the technology that we have and the amount of data that's flowing back and forth constantly. We can do that. And it seems like Street Fighter, when Capcom was releasing the game, it was just before it had come out, Street Fighter V, they pledged to update the game once a year. And fans actually were pretty much on board with that because, like I said, that's kind of what we've come to expect. We actually ran a poll on it, and it was something like almost 60% of the responses were, yes, I'd like it no more than once a year. That sounds about right. Yep. Give us some time with it. But that's antiquated, man. I think that we need to be doing it much more than one time a year. And before I go into all of my details, though, I want to ask you directly, how do you feel about this generally right now?
I think back in the Street Fighter 4 era, we should have been updating the game about once every 2 to 3 months. But you've got a bunch of pro players who were super whiny about it. And they're like, whoa, blah, 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 I've got to learn this and other stuff. And it's like, well, too freaking bad, you know, and that's pretty much the reason how come developers have been maybe not as proactive about how often they should be updating these games. Mm-hmm. Because when we know something is a very clear problem, like, and this goes back to like, season 2 Laura and Balrog, or, season 2 Urien and stuff like that should be addressed pretty early on. And that shouldn't be able to, run rampant for a year. That it should be like, give it 3 or 4 months, give it a little bit of time, but especially with the games, the way they're dissected now, how much technology we have in the FGC in terms of like, Twitch, YouTube, how quickly everything is shared and just dissected. It's a very different game than it was, back in like the Marvel 2 era or whatever, where, we would meet up periodically to try this stuff out. But like day in and day out, again, like I always joke about the VHS tapes we used to share.
Ice, baby.
That's... Yeah. So, but my opinion is very strongly like probably about on average every 3 months there should be some more balance updates put into the game.
That's what I
Give
say.
Falk something more. So
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And so I think that we should go from what we're doing now, which was proposed to be once a year. First of all, that's not even what Capcom has done. They've more or less been forced, or at least it's felt that way, that they've seen it fit to do these halfway through the season, mid-season balance updates for the entire roster in most cases, where they've just been like, once a year just isn't enough for our purposes. And you look around and you see other games, other genres. I talk about Heroes of the Storm, that's a MOBA, right? But you got like MOBAs, you've got things like Overwatch, Counter-Strike. There's plenty out there. So I went around looking and got a couple of examples of how often these other games tend to get updates. And for Heroes of the Storm, you can bet on an update just about once every month or so. And with Counter-Strike, there's an update almost every week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes in like 5 days away from each other. Now, it's not the entire game that's being changed. It's not the entire roster. Some of it is just bug fixes, which Capcom does do with Street Fighter V. You see those kind of patch notes roll out usually about once a month or so, and it'll be like little things tweaked around here or there, but not gameplay wise and not, mechanics wise and things along those lines, just little background bug problems. I think that these other games and such are doing it very, very frequently. And yes, there are potholes that you can step in if you're doing it that often. But going from a year, even every 6 months, to once every 3 months, I think would be huge for fighting games, because now you're still, you're still giving some time so that people can figure stuff out and they're not falling into the mommy patch it instead of figuring out how to actually beat the thing that appears to be overpowered at first. And I think that's good. I think you do need to give some time to say, all right, it feels crazy at first, it feels overpowered, but let's pick at it for a while. Maybe it's not what it seems. That kind of a thing has happened plenty of times. There's plenty of instances of that happening over the course of fighting games and Street Fighter. But I don't know. I just it's the kind of thing where, like you said, with social media, with CFN, they got so much information, so much data flowing back and forth, that they can be taking that and being so much more effective and efficient with how they tweak their games. They know right down to which characters are winning, which characters are being picked, like which V skills are being used and which V triggers are being used more often. They probably know how many times Honda is pressing Fierce Punch. Like, they probably have that level of data. And you might say, well, I don't know how much manpower Capcom might have, and like, fair enough, but where these other companies are doing it every month, every week, I'm saying once every 3 months. And when we think about a balance patch for Street Fighter, we're usually thinking it's the entire cast. No, it's your problem moves. It's your issues that you're hearing about repeatedly on Twitter, and on places like event hubs, places like what's the other one? Shoryuken. We're all over the place. You hear this kind of information. You take what you're seeing in CFN, and you kind of get an idea. And then so something like Seth's axe kick, for instance. Seth comes out, and people knew within about a week or two, the axe kick looks like a problem. And you're starting to hear rumblings of this is too powerful for multiple reasons. And Seth had a handful of things that were too powerful, but you could just use the axe kick example. And you go, all right, so I think I got an idea that this is going to be a problem, but you still have a few months to see if it continues to be, for the community to figure things out about it. And if it still is a problem after 3 months, maybe it's time to tweak it. And maybe just by a few frames, that's just fine. Maybe reduce the hurt box, or the hitbox rather, just a little bit, and then release it back into the wild and see what happens. But instead, in the case of Seth and Seth's axe kick, we knew it was a problem in week one, maybe week two, and we had to wait 12 months before that was actually attended to. Not only that, but when you do it on this broad spectrum of like everybody gets changes, and it's within like a new mechanic coming in and global changes to like now throws are this many frames or whatever it is, then it's not only balancing the individual things that you're tweaking around. Everything bounces off of everything else. And so, sure, you're going to change a few things about Nash to try to get him to where he needs to be, but the whole game is also shifting simultaneously. How can you predict how the changes that you're going to give to Nash are going to resonate with virtually the entire rest of the cast, plus the new mechanic, if you bring a new mechanic in on a yearly basis? And I would say that in terms of mass global changes like that, maybe that could be limited to once a year or so, not every time. And again, it's just like a few characters I'm talking about here at a time. But it really needs to be more along these lines. And then, so it's like if you're trying to fine tune this game and you're doing it once a year, once every 6 months, the kind of dial that you're trying to twist, it's like it's instead of twisting a dial, you're like spinning the whole thing in the general direction you want things to go, and like, well, we'll see where it ends up. And then wherever it ends up, it's like, well, that worked out a little bit, and it really didn't work out here. But regardless, we're not touching it again for at least 6 months, probably a year. It's like that feels so antiquated to me. It needs to not be the policy anymore. And
Yeah.
with this approach, if players know that something pops up like a ridiculous move that just seems to be overpowered for whatever reason, then they know it's like, okay, well, we can do something about this. We can complain about it, or we can voice our opinions that it needs to be changed in a respectful manner, and that it likely will be, so that what they're playing in is not so demoralizing. And it's like, well, they just have it, and then maybe Capcom will attend to it at the end of the year when they do their balance patch, but maybe they won't. And I got to look at, like, with this policy, we had Ryu to begin with was way too strong, right? In season one. And then so they way turned this knob in the other direction and they murdered him. And he was a joke of a character who also happened to be the franchise poster boy. How long and how many sessions of tweaks and balance patches did it take to get Ryu to a place that he needed to be for him to feel like a respectable poster boy for the game and for the franchise? It was like 5 years, right? Like 4 or 5 years. How long did Alex need to be attended to, and how many balance patches did he need to go to? How many times did Lariat need to get buffed?
Alex still needs to be attended to, man. Alex
Right.
is, he's a problem.
And but he's better than
Anyway.
he has been, and he's not the meme that he's been for so long. And then, like, with Nash more recently, and so, like, all of these problems, how many times did we need to attend to Rashid before he got to a relatively good spot? And instead of that, you could say, okay, Rashid's a problem. Let's tweak one thing or two things about him, put that back out into the widely otherwise unchanged atmosphere, and see how that resonates and see how it bounces off. It's like you have the ability to be so much more precise with your balance, which is so important for these games. And everybody else has adopted this and then taken it to the next level. Like I said, Street Fighter was kind of the first ones to be doing this kind of thing. But now everybody else is doing it on a much more frequent basis. And I would argue seeing much better results. And for Street Fighter specifically, to not be jumping on this particular train, I think is an error.
Yeah. And I think that under the new management, since some previous staff members have left, I think we're seeing more updates now. The most recent patch is doing more of this, where they buff the heck out of Nash, and it's great to see. And now Nash is actually something of a character, where before he was pretty much worthless. Now he's like actually interesting, and you're seeing some good stuff from him. And it's really important in fighting games, I think, that there's not just this incredibly clear separation of tiers, where there's a viable tier and then there's like just some characters like you just never touch because they're worthless, right? And I think that with Gil, now even like he was previously in that tier for a lot of people, I think now that you're seeing some kind of results and other stuff with him, they give him a significant buff to his meter gain. And now you're seeing more Gil players come out. I know Nemo's playing him more often now. There's, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. And it's not like, Gil got the world set on fire in terms of like what his changes were. It's like, no, we give him a bit more meter gain, and all of a sudden all the people who are putting time into Gil, they're like, well, let me put some more time into him. And that makes your game so much better when you have true diversity in it. I get Rashid and Makuma and all that stuff being villains and all that, but we're also talking about when people go online and like they're going to decide between playing Hearthstone or playing Street Fighter 5. It's like, well, Street Fighter 5 just got some new balance updates for my main character. Let me go try that out. Let me go see if this can reignite some of my passions for the game, leads into DLC sales and all that kind of stuff. And I do think Capcom is wrapping their head around this approach now. I don't know exactly what the holdup was before. It could have been a lot of things, but I do know that it seems like they're gravitating more towards this approach now. So
Yeah, I really like that. I also think, like, Street Fighter V in general took about 5 years to get to a place where most of us were ultimately happy with it. And I think that could have been achieved in maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, if this other approach were taken up. And that's not to, it should have been a good game to begin with, whatever, all that stuff. But that's not what I'm getting at here. I'm just saying that the changes and the improvements could be more precise and more directed and more frequent if we do it this well. Obviously more frequent, but it's just so much better of a policy given the setting that we're in now, given how things work, and given the examples of other games around us that we see. It's like I not only do I want to see if my character is better, but maybe if I go online now and I know that Cammy's dive kick was nerfed in a certain way, and I can implement this new strategy of V-shifting and punishing it, that's something else for me to grab onto and try to beat the former top tiers. I know every time a new Heroes of the Storm patch comes out, I have like a little chat with like 6 or 7 other guys that I tend to play with. Someone will link up the patch notes and note like, oh, Vala got changes. She was like super OP and now she's not going to be as bad anymore. It's like, oh, thank goodness, that's going to be really nice. And also, Anduin got some buffs. Why'd he get buffs? That doesn't make any sense, but we'll take it. I play him, and things along those lines. And it gets conversation started. It gets fires and passions ignited. And that's something that we've seen an issue with Street Fighter a lot of times, and not just in 5, but like sometimes these games start to feel stale, especially when expectations in the gaming world, generally speaking, have kind of grown in this direction, where I think it's a game as a service. I expect it to be fine-tuned because I know you guys can, and I know that you do. And again, to ask Street Fighter to do it once every 3 months is still not that much, especially compared to most of the others around right now. I think we could have much better games. I think, oh, no one's playing Fong. Okay, tweak him up a little bit. Give him something that's more fun. Get him closer to where you want him to be. Make him more appealing in some way. Oh, you overcorrected and he's way too good now. All right, fair enough. Well, we'll correct back a little bit. And we're not so committed that like we don't have to be so afraid of changes, because if you do too much, hey, in 3 months, and maybe if you need a super balance patch, like an immediate emergency balance patch, you could do that too. And you only have to take a handful of characters at a time, the ones that are making the most ruckus and maybe the ones that are making the least ruckus, and attend to them a little bit and then see. So much more precision, so much faster in terms of making your game get to where it goes. And again, this is Capcom 101. This is how they've been doing things. It just needs to be sped up. And I think if they do that, they can start competing with well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself there, but I think it's a much better look for them, and I think that their games thrive even more, and their audience is more involved and more excited and more trusting and all of these things. I think it's
I agree for the most part, but I've talked to some Capcom staff members, and their view of Street Fighter V is not really positive. Now, the game is in a better spot than it's ever been, but in terms of like how long of a lifespan this game has in front of it, I think again, like you just do the right thing no matter what, and updating the game more often is the right thing to do, right? But it's also like, I know that a lot of resources are going into Street Fighter 6, and it's hard for Capcom to keep this game as updated maybe as they maybe want to. I don't want to make too many excuses
and
here.
I think that these kind of balance things drop off as the team gets fewer and they move on to different projects. That's completely understandable. I'm not necessarily even making this argument for Street Fighter V right now. I think, sure, but I don't know. They probably already have their plans, and it might be a little bit too late for this. But I mean, as policy moving forward, when we get Street Fighter 6, if we get another Marvel, if future Capcom fighting titles, and I think fighting titles in general for the most part, especially from AAA big time developers like Capcom, regularly attend to them. People are going to be excited. They're going to make your games better. You're going to get through the problems that your games have much more rapidly, and it's just good on all sides. And make it happen, make it work. It's 2021. Update your games more often.
I agree. Totally agree. All right, John, do you want to talk about the 4 reasons why you're losing in Street Fighter V? And me too, and everyone else.
You said that so excited, like, because I mean, I appreciate your enthusiasm with that, right? But you're like, do you want to talk about why the 4 reasons you're losing? And I'm like, I'm on board. Oh my gosh, a self-reflection. I'm a terrible person, and I don't have enough LP, and I'm not cool. But yeah, I'll ride that wave. Why am I losing so much in Street Fighter V, and why are you so excited about that?
All right, because I'm so excited because there are easy ways to fix it. These are tips that anyone can use, relatively speaking. So if you find yourself constantly saying, I always lose to that move, that's reason number 1. You're losing more often than you should. You need to watch more of your own footage. Just load up actually your own replay after a set. And that's one of the best ways to do it. You don't have to do it every single time, but if you find that you're always losing to, say, like, Rashid's V trigger or something like that, go load up your last CFN matchup against a Rashid, go look at the frame data in there, go look at the inputs, go look at all that kind of stuff. And oftentimes you can easily see if you're negative, plus, all that other kind of stuff. It's a really easy method that a lot of people don't do. It sounds like you want to jump in on that one.
I have a duality, I think, as all of us do. Some people love watching their losses. They're weird. That's not me at all. I hate the stuff. Like, yeah, it's not me. But at the same time, when I finally do get myself to go in and watch a replay, and I learn so much so quickly, because I'll find myself being, don't do that, stupid, and then I realize that was me, and go, okay, well, I can identify what I was thinking and feeling in that moment. It's usually much more of a feeling thing instead of a thinking thing if you're making a dumb mistake. And the way that it helps you broaden your understanding of what you're looking at, and then therefore have the ability to make the change, because you kind of put the specific issue under the microscope, and it's usually something super simple. It's like, just keep blocking here. You have an instinct to tech or whatever the thing is, but if you just keep blocking here, that solves this problem, which will then keep you out of this situation, which will then let you do this more, and the changes can be so easy, so obvious, and so impactful, but only if you get yourself to go in there. And I say that, and I've reaped those benefits before, and I still go, like, I don't want to go and watch the replay. It's going to take so long. It's going to load up. I got to watch myself get my ass kicked again. I just lived it. So I get it. I get the reservation to not want to do it, but also, as someone who's done it, I'm preaching to you and to myself, keep doing it, or start doing it.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you brought up the time thing, because my next point is, actually, it doesn't take a lot of time. Like, I don't recommend going back and watching every single one of your replays. I think a lot of people would rather be spending time playing the game. That's what they're there for.
You narcissist.
But what you want to do is just, when you run across a move like repeatedly, like, you're just like, okay, well, what's Kin's Tatsu on block in this scenario and other stuff, and what can I punish it and stuff with? Like, I've ran into it 20 times, because I'm in Brazil and there's only 2-bar 3-bar Kin players or something like that, is what the meme is what I've heard in Brazil. But anyway,
comment with your best Brazilian Ken story from your online ventures.
I've heard it's the thing. So but anyway, just go back and look at the replay for that, and just go to the round, go to the situation that happened, and it actually only takes about a minute to go do. Now, if you do need to grind out the footage, like session, like, have a beer, put on some music, listen to the Event Hubs podcast, I don't know, something like that. And you can actually make it kind of a fun thing that you do. Like, it's more of like, when you're watching footage, you don't have to be grinding it out. It's just more of kind of like picking up on these little patterns and stuff, and like, have a good time with it. It's a whole point about this, is just like, it shouldn't be a slog. You should be able to, like, kind of get in, get out, get the information you need, and you're good. And then kind of move on from it. That's why it's number one. Also, I do recommend that sometimes people, they go, okay, well, like, I like watching my footage, but I also want to check out like what Sako is doing or what Daigo is doing. And that's good, but it also can be bad depending on your level. Like, what I often do for myself is I focus on players that are a rank or two above me, because sometimes the stuff that Sako is doing is like, I'm just not capable of doing that right now. It's far beyond me. Like, all the levels he's going through, I'm going, I'm just trying to DP here.
When they're doing something and it seems simple, but you don't know why it's working, like, why are they jumping and it works, and every time I jump it doesn't work? That's because there's a disconnect. Not because they're magical, but because they're aware of a bunch of little things that you're probably not aware of yet. And I think that's what sort of you're getting at there, is that
exactly.
Yeah. So yeah.
So let's say you're silver rank, go watch someone who's gold rank, and a lot of their stuff might be a lot easier to translate. And again, if like some of these people, like, they're like, hey, you follow my gold rank Nash, like on CFN, why do you watch all my replays? It's like, well, I'm silver rank. This is super helpful. Like, you don't realize, like, you're a step above me, and the stuff like, Sako or whoever's doing, or Bonchan is just way too advanced for me. But you're closer to my level, and so this stuff translates a little easier. So it's not just watching your footage, also watching footage of people who are comparable to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're not trying to, like, for another Shooty Hoops example, you're not trying to, like, do the kind of things LeBron James is doing at his best, when you're trying to work on how do I consistently dribble with both hands and, like, maybe through the legs kind of a thing. So it's not helpful for you to try to be learning how to dunk from, like, the free throw line when you're just trying to get basic dribbling skills down. But like some guy that's just been doing it for a little bit longer than you, that's the guy that you're going to have something to learn from, because it's a bite-sized, feasible step forward that you can take. You don't have to jump from half court all the way, across the whole thing.
I want to see someone jump from half court, though, because that sounds pretty
Check out
awesome.
Space Jam.
Well, hey, you know what? They got a sequel coming out, too, so good point. All right, so speaking of Space Jam 2, number 2 is don't be in the wrong spots on the screen. Street Fighter V is actually a pretty unique game in the franchise where it's quite similar to Marvel, where offense is king. There are certain spots on screen where if you're there, you're eating an awful mix-up. Almost every single V-trigger in the game is about plus 1000 on block, except for Falk for some reason. I don't know what Capcom was doing there, but regardless, pretty much one of the most obvious things you see, like from a Karen player, is like sweep range. Like they're going to sweep and go into V-trigger. With Cammy, it's crouching heavy punch into V-trigger. When these fighters have V-trigger, it's very, very, very likely they're going to try to activate it, because it is a super advantageous situation for them. And so since this is a Marvel versus Capcom type of game, and like Marvel, basically, if you were in the wrong spot on screen, someone would call an assist, they do a move, and they do 50 mix-ups, and it's like, okay, can you block that? Probably not. Like, it is... Offense is very dominant in that game, and so is it in Street Fighter V. And so actually you're at an extreme disadvantage if you're in certain spots on screen. You basically just need to get the hell out of those and make someone commit to activating their V-trigger, for example. So if you're outside of Cammy's crouching heavy punch range, that's a much bigger commitment for her, because if it blocks her hits normally, like, it doesn't matter, because V-trigger, she's going right into it, right? But you want to make it whiff. You want to not be there. And then all of a sudden it whiffs, and it's like, okay, well, now you have a punish opportunity, or you have an escape opportunity, and your opponent will kind of start to flail to get into their V-trigger. Their V-trigger is so good, unless they're Urian, then they have a free activation every time. But besides Urian players, you kind of want to space them out and basically kind of get them on tilt for trying to activate too much. And then you can get a jump in, then you can get other stuff. There's a lot of things that opens up, just basically not being in the spot on screen where someone can kill you.
Yeah, I think the most obvious and probably the best place to start with this is absolutely V-triggers, because of what they are, because of how they can change the course of rounds so quickly. I just recently did a big exploration on Laura. We're gonna have a video coming out about that in the next few days, and a lot of it was, the fact of the matter is, you don't want to be in her V-trigger blender to begin with. So the fight is actually to stay out of where you might get put into that, and a huge part of it is, well, when she wants to activate, where and how does she like to activate the most? And then so how do you position yourself to not be susceptible to that? And so that's a really good place to start, and you absolutely need to know that for V-trigger. But you can see how just understanding where the best places for your character to stand and where not to stand, depending on who you're fighting against, are incredibly helpful. It's the kind of thing that not a lot of people think about in the real-time strategy, but it's so good. I mean, one of the most obvious ones is, like, if Guile has you cornered, kind of caged, and is just throwing light sonic booms where you can't react with a jump, you're never going to get him because his recovery's too quick, but he's right at that perfect distance, that sweet spot. A lot of zoners have it, right, where they can throw a fireball safely and still anti-air you if you try to jump over it. It's like, you just don't want to be there. Like, you don't want to make your next move in terms of trying to get offense started until you manipulate the spacing that you are from them so that you can be more effective, because there they have all of the cards, right? And so you need to find out the places where you hold all the cards, and you need to know where they hold all the cards, avoid those spots, and try to get into the ones where it's beneficial for you, not just with V-triggers, but where your character can make their game plan, whether, and whatever that might be, trying to goad them into overextending, trying to be ready to pounce on them if they throw a fireball, whatever it might be. But paying special attention to those things, again, it's not intuitive for everybody. It certainly hasn't been for me. I think I do it to a degree instinctually, but being actively aware with the front of your brain, so to speak, about those kinds of things can be hugely helpful. It's just like this, the nature of like what it implies and how that changes the juggling act and what your opponent has to hold if you're in those spots versus if you're not. It's such a powerful tool, and it's something that you should be working with actively in your gameplay. So 100% agree.
There you go. Number 3 is a reason why you're losing is your mental game is off. This is a game designed to put you on tilt. It's very commitment based, so keeping as calm as you can is huge. You see players like Tokido, Daigo, and others practicing deep breathing between rounds. And focusing on deep breathing, there's an actual science behind this. The University of Michigan, despite disavowing all of the badass stuff the Fab Five did, they noted that when you breathe deeply, it sends a message to your brain to calm down and relax. This is science, people. Like, this is actual science. It impacts your health. It's something everyone can do. And when your brain is more calm and relaxed, you have a better chance of reacting to that kin mix-up. Even if the kin player is from Brazil and has 2-bar connections, you have a better chance of doing that. Shout out to all of our Brazilian fans out there that are, disowning
all of
us
you
at
that
this
just
moment in
left,
time.
thank you for your time that you did commit to the Event Hubs podcast
Yes,
and YouTube
we
channel. Leave a
appreciate
comment on your way out, and please don't unsubscribe.
Yeah, it's but of course, anyway, I digress. When your brain is more calm and relaxed, you have a better chance of reacting to anything that's going on in the game. You might know exactly how to block, you might know what to do, but if your brain is all on tilt, your chances of reacting are much less, and reacting correctly, I should say. So deep breathing is one of the best ways to lower your body's stress levels. And again, it's a very simple thing that I see a lot of people not doing, just taking a minute. Just like Street Fighter V's rounds, like the pauses between them, they're pretty long, or between games and stuff like that. Shout out to load times, right? I think it was like Bonchan or someone like that. He's like, the load times are so long, I have a really good chance to get my mental composure back between,
Especially on PS4. I played on PS4 last night at our little outing, and I was immediately reminded, like, oh my gosh, I just grew 3 more gray hairs in the time it took this match to load up.
I don't need any more gray hairs, man. But yes, so there are a lot of mental exercises that you could do to get yourself in the best possible spot to play. Like just playing up to your potential. Like if, I don't care if like you're playing at maximum potential, you're probably not beating Daigo on your best day unless you're a pro level player, right? But if you're playing the best you possibly can for your skill set, you're doing everything you can. And a lot of that comes down to mental composure. A lot of that just comes down to, doing breathing exercises or getting into the right mindset or just focusing on what you need to be focusing on. And I can't tell you how many players I see crumble in the mental game all the time, and it's hard. It's legitimately hard to do.
I used to be very much of the mind that these little things like take a breath and breathe and all that stuff was kind of just hullabaloo, and maybe it was some kind of a, like, if you're ritualistic about it, it might help other individuals, but it was never a thing for me because I was always about, like, what can I tangibly see change things for me in a, like, sweeping way. When I was a little kid, I think this ties into it too. I'm playing again, basketball, shooty hoops. There's an SNES basketball game, NCAA, and I used to only take half-court shots. I didn't want to deal with the nuances of trying to drive up and get 2 points. What was that? No, just like shoot broadly and get 3 points and see the score change as much as possible and have these most impactful things. The little details didn't add up to much for me, but with something like this now, I can really appreciate how it really comes down to this little tiny weights on a scale. It doesn't have to be this giant, anvil that you put down to affect some change. It can be little things here and there, little breaths, little reminders to yourself, whatever it is that helps you specifically, and take the time to figure out what helps you specifically. I think those things really do add up, and that's just by an evidence of like experience and seeing, like, yeah, I do get tilted. These things do affect me, and taking deep breaths does something, both physically, like the chemicals, the way things balance out in your brain and such. I think it helps with all of those kinds of things, and it really does add up to legitimate, helpful change. So I come from a place where I used to be like, no, you just need huge, obvious, sweeping, changing things that'll help you or not. No, the little things add up, and so all those small things do them.
Yep. So number 4 on the list is dialing back your bad habits, and this one is a doozy. It's really, really, really important. This game is all about being efficient and not making a ton of hard reads consistently. I know this game's about commitment, but how many hard reads are you going to make before you rip a EXDP or something like that you should not, right? And let me give people an example of a bad habit, though, that's a little bit more of a tangible thing. Let's say that 70% of the time when you open up a round, you jump forward. And your success rate for doing that is only 20% or so. Like and so there's a pretty big reward for jumping forward in this game. And you might think, well, like 20% of the time it works. 20% of the time it works every time.
Every time.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever jump forward. But if you're only having 20% success on it, you probably need to dial that back a little bit better. So you're not getting rid of a bad habit, because I don't know how many bad habits truly exist in Street Fighter V, because you never want to take options entirely off the table in this game. That's a very different kind of Street Fighter thing than we've had in the past, where it's like, yeah, that button and that move in Street Fighter 4, you should just never use it ever. That's not this game. Like, they're pretty much all these options, all these things, they have a purpose, they have a reason for it. But you do need to look at how successful you are with them versus the risk and reward of what you get for actually doing them. So, for example, let's say that when you're cornered, you go for a tech throw 50% of the time. Now, it's not that you shouldn't ever go for a tech throw when you're cornered, but 50% of the time might be too much for your character and your situation. So what you can do is you can try to go to it like maybe 30% of the time. And instead of that, you replace it with like a crouching light punch or a crouching like a jab move, basically. And you just basically make a conscious effort to do less throw techs, especially when you're going back and watching your footage and other things. And you're saying like, okay, that's a real problem for me. This is a bad habit. Let me dial this back a bit. And that's really where the big focus comes in. It's not about like getting rid of the things you do because you're probably doing them for a reason. It's just like finding what you're not efficient, what you're not good at doing as well as often, and then just, you know, tweaking the knob down a little bit, just turning it down a bit.
The feeling as I think about this and the process of, especially someone like me, I play very instinctually and don't update, at least historically speaking, didn't update my gameplay in real time very often. So like, especially in SF4, coming from there, it was all about throw techs, and then I'd have problems with that in that game if someone started to blow me up for it. And I had problems in Street Fighter 5 still kind of adhering to that idea of throwing too often, so I might get shimmied a little more often than the average player, something like that. When you identify that kind of an issue, whatever it might be, and then you finally do the thing that your instinct, your gut wasn't telling you to do, but it's the other choice. It's like, well, try this out here. It's almost like it's hard to do because it's not what your gut is saying, but you break through that kind of that fake false barrier, and all of a sudden when you do it, you begin to like teach your mind or your psyche that that's okay. And not only is it okay to do, not only is it an option, it actually feels better. You do that a couple of times, and then you sort of reprogram yourself to either, it's usually not to just do that now every time in the situation, because it's usually like a revolving, you know, wheel of choices that you have to make, but you start to sample that in, and then your brain kind of does it for you as you continue to play and you pepper that in. It just gets adopted as now one of the revolving options that you can go to, and that refines your abilities. But you have to have that initial breakthrough to uncomfortably press, you know, what would one be like, waking up and to beat shimmies on your wake up. So instead of throwing every time, I have to wake up with low forward, which for me was like an 8-frame move at the time. I remember like doing it for the first time and going, everything in my being says I just want to protect myself from the throw here, but my logical brain said, well, I keep getting blown up for that. What's the answer? This very risky, when you're thinking about a wake up situation, low forward, but I did it and it worked. And then the rewards came in, and all of a sudden that but got put into the network of possibilities for what I do in this situation. And I don't wake up with it very often, but it's there. And so that's the process of adding in new tools to your arsenal and diversifying your options, your portfolio.
Yep. There you go. So to recap the 4 rules, make sure, number 1, you're watching your own footage and looking for when you run into consistent problems, right? Number 2, don't be in the wrong spots on screen at the wrong times. Like, just don't do it. It's Street Fighter 5. You're going to die. Number 3, don't let your mental game be off. And number 4, dialing back your bad habits. Those are 4 simple rules that you can follow that anyone can use. And if you're already doing it, hey, more power to you. But any player on the planet can use this stuff. You see it from the pros, you see it from other people, you see it from those 2-bar Brazilian kin players that are out there. Sometimes, maybe they're doing one of them.
I feel
maybe,
like you
maybe
don't. I feel like that's the point, is that you don't. But fair enough. Agree to disagree.
All right, John, what you got?
Well, something that you cannot disagree with: the objective 10 best alternate costumes in Street Fighter 5, as told by me. There are like 6 billion costumes at this point, 3 billion in Chun's wardrobe, and the rest go to the rest of the other 42 characters or whatever it is. But I have gone through and objectively listed the best alternate costumes, starting with, and these are in no particular order, Ryu's Jin Sayotome, is that how you say that? Costume. Now, this is cool in and of itself. It's a crossover for another Capcom character, and it's like a cool like ninja robot with a robot-esque sort of a thing with spikes on his armor and whatnot, and a long flowing kind of like samurai headband. That's just fine. But the reason that this costume is one of the absolute best is because if you do the Easter egg code, which is, I believe, I just hold all punch, light kick, and up, and I think it's all 3 punches, or I don't know, but that gets it done. When you do that, Ryu sheds all of it, save for the headband and his underwear, which is like thong-like underwear, gives Urian's banana hammock a run for his money. And this is the best because it's incredibly distracting, first of all. And when you win with Ryu, his win pose is he turns away from the camera and begins walking away to the next fight, very Ryu. And it holds on this shot of his perfectly toned and sculpted buttocks that's just right there for you to feast your hungry eyes on. And so what happens is, as you play against people, they don't realize it, but subconsciously they want to lose to this character so that they can get to that win screen. And I find that if I play this Ryu, I get so many more wins just because people subconsciously want to lose to him. So it's one of the absolute best costumes in the entire game. I think it's color number 5 gives you the blue armor and the red underwear, which I think is the best of all of them. So Ryu's super sexy, perfect buttocks Jin Satomi costume, one of the best. Did you have any comments on that?
Well, the red draws attention to it, so it's very important, and that's the one I see almost everyone use online. They're like, look, if you're going to be looking somewhere, you better be looking at where this red thing is at, and so you're pretty much, your attention is really drawn and focused there. And I could not agree with you more that is definitely the best color for that alternative outfit.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so number 2, Blanka-chan. You guys knew this one was coming. We'll get it out of the way fairly early here. This was probably the most impactful costume. There are some other ones that are in that discussion there, but when Blanka-chan came out, it was such a thing. It was a moment. We did multiple stories on it, and they did well. Like, people were engaged with them. They wanted to explore this. So many memes came out. And it's not just that the costume looks goofy and entertaining in and of itself, which it does. This giant kind of plushy version of this character, and he's a fighter. It's like, how could you do any damage with these big foam arms, right? That's not the point. Point is, it so perfectly lines up with who Blanka is as a character, and not how he was originally designed necessarily, but how he has evolved as a character and in the way the community perceives him to be something of a troll, and to win with these tactics that are not necessarily legitimate when it comes to general Street Fighter theory and all that kind of stuff. But, what do you imagine is going on in a Blanka's brain, or a Blanka player's brain, when they're going ham on you online and using lag to hop around and do goofy, unsafe, balls and things like that? If you were able to look into the brain, you just see like one of those monkeys with like the symbols going shh, 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 right? And when you look at Blanka-chan, it is that incarnate. It's just this big dumb face. I know it doesn't have a tongue hanging out, but it might as well, like a goofy dog with the tongue hanging out the side of his mouth. And you think like, that is how the community sees Blanka when they get rolled by him, by his balls, online and stuff. It's like you were just sitting there and there's the monkey with the symbols in your brain and you beat me, and it's super frustrating. Well, this costume, just you can almost see it inside of the costume is just the monkey with the symbols, and so it caused such a stir in such a good way. It so totally encapsulated what this character has become, and I think it was a really smart and really well executed choice by Capcom.
Yeah, I forget the do 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 do, like the goofy music that plays when like something, it happens in a sitcom and other stuff like that. But like Blanka's music should be replaced by that whenever he picks a Blanka-chan costume. And maybe it can like come from his outfit, like he's got like a music box in there or something like that plays while he fights. Because it's like, and again, it's Blanka. He's a shenanigan character. Like if he was not that, I would be pissed off about it. And so big ups to Capcom. Like Blanka-chan became a phenomenon for a while. This is like, it is a gold costume. Like if I played Blanka, I might use this. I might use the one with like the most distracting features too that I could find. It's like, this is what you do with Blanka. And if he didn't have this, like I just feel like the game would be worse for it.
Yeah, so. and we all know what it is to get frustrated by Blanka, right? And you imagine if you were to scream and yell your frustrations at Blanka-chan, and he's just sitting there with his eyes going in like different directions and like tongue hanging out of his mouth. It's like, who's the idiot? That guy or the guy that's screaming at that? It's so perfect. I love it. All right, little change of direction here. Number 3 is Chun-Li's battle dress. That's the black and gold dress. It is absolutely beautiful. She lets her hair down. It has been cosplayed a bajillion times, and hot damn, is it sexy? Is it gorgeous? This is just an example of Capcom, and I think Capcom with this and Hot Ryu, they really wanted to make an impact and really give their poster boy trademark characters something of like a little extra oomph when the game released or shortly thereafter. Give people something to talk about, care about, spend their money on, and this just did it. I don't think I've seen a Chun-Li costume come out that's better than this one. I mean, her iconic original costume, that is what it is, but man, I really like the battle costume. And like I said, but how many times it's been cosplayed and how often we talk about it, and how still it's relevant despite her having 3 billion other costumes, I think really speaks to it. So just really gorgeously done, well executed, and perfect for Chun-Li.
Yeah, I can't add anything more than what you just said there. It looks great. So great costume.
All right, this next one is probably a little controversial in that I don't think a lot of people would realize that this is objectively one of the 10 best costumes in the entire game, because I don't see it very often, but that is Kage's Asura crossover costume. This Asura is an interesting character. Is another Capcom character from a whole other game, which I think that there's some overlap. And Akuma showed up in Asura's Wrath, if I understand it correctly. I've never played,
or like Oni or something like that. I forget exactly who, but it was one of the devil. Oni characters.
Right, and Evil Ryu being like a demon version, sort of in that realm of Capcom's poster boy Ryu, it makes sense, and so he becomes Asura, and that's cool in and of itself. He's kind of got this like sort of broken, cracked the Thing skin, and it totally works for the characters, little horns and everything. It looks decently like Asura, but then when you do the Easter egg, he gets all of Asura's arms and throws up all the gang symbols, at once. And then like that's something that is just every time I would do it, like playing at casuals or tournament or whatever, people would talk about it. They'd be like, "Oh, I didn't realize. Like that's super cool and that's interesting. And what's that? And like, is that West Side Bloods, whatever it was?" And it's always been really funny and not really funny, but really cool. It's funny to see that like people are like, oh, their reactions to it and such. But it's one of my favorite, and he's got a couple of different good colors that just really between that and the pants that he's wearing, because he doesn't have a shirt on for it. They just look really cool, and I think it's a super underrated costume that not enough people play. I mean, not a ton of people play Kage in the first place, and he has some good other costumes as well. But that one I think is his best and one of the best in the whole game.
Yeah, people who disagree with that opinion and who happen to be gang members, please don't kill us for this. we don't support gangs here on Event Hubs, and yeah, so there it is. So yeah, but I agree, it's a great costume.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
I just don't want to die. Yeah.
All right, next one up on the list.
The Brazilian kin players are going to come after me next, man. I'm done.
The Sharks, the Jets, and the Brazilian Kens, huh?
Yeah, this is my last episode of the Event Hubs podcast. I'm done. I'm canceled, or I'm going to be killed. One or the other. So there it is.
Right on. Well, before that happens, the next one here on the list is Lucia's sporty beach volleyball costume. It is simple. There's not a ton to it, which is part of its charm. Lucia is a very well-designed character. I think she's pretty, and this costume really helps her show her stuff off. It's nice to look at. And same idea as the Ryu stuff, but just in kind of the other direction. Not a ton to say. It's cool. And when you do the the Easter egg, she actually puts on this top that's kind of like a raggy top. It doesn't look very good. And then she puts on the sports dad shades, which it's kind of funny, but certainly takes away from the whole thing. Don't do the costume, but also do the red version. It's pretty good. That's the one Thrasher uses against me all the time. And again, it's distracting for me. I have to put my Ryu against his Lucia, and just whoever has the weaker mind that day ends up losing. So.
Yeah, I do have to disagree with you on this one. I would have went with Lucia's bunny ears. I love that costume. She looks fantastic in it. But this one's a really good one too. So I just I like the bunny ears. I'm a little partial to that, but there you go.
Fair enough. But you're wrong. Okay, next one up. This one you almost never see anymore because the character rarely gets played in the first place. And also I wanted to point out I've kept it to one costume per character in the top 10, so that's why like Hot Ryu is going to be an honorable mention, but he didn't get on there because he doesn't beat Ryu Jin. There's another costume for this character that I think is up there, but if I had to pick one, I would say it's Necalli and his Halloween werewolf costume. It looks pretty decent in and of itself. I like the idea, but the concept behind it of applying, if you're doing a Halloween theme and you see this character who literally evolves mid-match and becomes a more visceral, animalistic version of himself, that lends itself so perfectly to the idea of a werewolf, of a wolf man. And for them to have identified that and pulled the trigger on it and done it, it's like this is so perfect for who Necalli is, the the very little that we actually know about him, because his story is just kind of all over the place and seems almost like arbitrary in a lot of ways, but we won't go there. Necalli as a werewolf, I've got to give that a spot on the list.
Yeah, this was a costume that you rocked for the longest time, and we were listening to a lot of the Backstreet Boys back in the day. Everybody, and like in there, someone's a werewolf, and we were like constantly trolling John with like images of like whoever the werewolf dude is. I don't know the Backstreet Boys' name. Sorry about that.
Liar.
But yeah, Ted or something like that. I don't know, Tim something. It's one of those names in there. But anyway, he's a werewolf in there, and we're like, hey, look, it's John Necalli. We were constantly sending him images and stuff of that for about like a year, and then we stopped. But now we're gonna start up again. So.
Right on. Okay, next one on the list is Poison. Poison's story dress costume. This is a lot different than most everything else you see Poison in, but it is gorgeous. It is, I think it's like her most clothed costume actually, but it is fairly form-fitting. Her hair is really done up in a way that you don't see it for Poison almost at all, and then she wears these really big aviator kind of glasses, sunglasses. My issue with Poison, if at all, in her design is that in some of her costumes her face looks fine. And in other ones, it's kind of distractingly weird, and I'm not sure. I can't really put my finger on what it is specifically. It might be the way, her hair frames it or something like that. I don't know. But this gets around that with the sunglasses, and then also like everything else about it is just really beautiful. And then there's some copatography where I get a lot of my high definition Street Fighter images that I'll use in a lot of banners and such. He's got a couple, or he or she, I don't know, has a couple of pictures of this particular costume pose and stuff, and it's like every time I'm scrolling through, I'm like, oh, those look really good. Like that looks really good. I don't play the character. I don't see people using the costume a ton, but it's just a really beautiful design that gets my attention every time I'm scrolling by. And so I got to give it a spot on the list.
Yeah, it's Christina Hendricks. She's a knockout, and Poison reminds me a lot.
She in Mad Men?
So, yeah, Mad Men. She's got red hair. She's got a very curvy shape to her. So they definitely give Poison that Christina Hendricks look. And she was on Firefly as well, I believe. But if you're a sci-fi nerd like me, but anyway, this is one of my favorite costumes, absolutely in the game.
Oh, would you put it on your top 10?
Oh, Poison's a knockout, man. Poison is
and
beautiful.
This one, beyond all of her other costumes, this specific one?
Yeah, hell yeah. No, I love almost every Poison costume out there, even from Street Fighter 4. Like, just Poison's just freaking awesome. So like she's one of the characters, like if I wasn't committed 120% to Rose, like Poison's probably the character I'd be playing right now. Poison, so much of what she is just works incredibly well for me. So,
okay. Next one, Holiday Bear Zangief.
Awkward transition there, yeah. Oh, we're
Only
going to
if
Zangief,
you point it out.
Yeah, okay.
Holiday Bear Zangief. I see this one pop up quite a bit. Zangief actually has some pretty cool costumes that don't get used enough, like the Gladiator one with his like Maximus helmet on, and some of his other ones too. But this one is, I think, his most popular. Well, maybe not. Maybe the Macho Man one is too. But this one is cool because again, I'm kind of a stickler for if the costume like resonates with the character's identity in some creative and intuitive way. I really like that, so the whole thing with Necalli and such, for example. But with Zangief, well, one, he's Russian. They're all about bears, and kind of connection with California there too a little bit, right? And then Zangief has in his story that he's known for wrestling bears during a tornado, or it wouldn't have been a hurricane, but a tornado, and that's how he developed his attack. And also I think he's traditionally gay, and he's like this big hulking hairy guy, which I think is along the lines of bear in terms of the gay community. So many things point back to bear for Zangief. And then also it looks cool. It's like this like what did he slay a bear and then he like wears it? Like that's pretty cool. And I think it's a Christmas costume, so I don't know exactly how that plays in. Maybe I'm missing something from some Russian Christmas tale or something along those lines. But it looks good. It ties in with the character's identity really well, and it's fairly popular. So I say give Zangief some love. Put him on the list.
Yeah, we're definitely getting canceled after all these things because commenting about any kind of nature of Street Fighter and like the racial stereotypes it has.
Oh, that's next week's yeah, we're gonna talk about El Fuerte, Rufus, all that good stuff. Let's T-Hawk. Let's go, baby.
Oh man, it's just even like diagnosing this stuff. I'm like going, oh man, like this is like it's so hard. It's so funny, like
Too
with the
spicy
cancel
for YouTube.
culture. Yeah, I mean the cancel culture and stuff like fighting games should be like banned in every country and other stuff, but it's like and again they're not to be taken too seriously. It's like it's stereotypes to play up like the stuff and whatnot, but just sometimes like when we're doing our analyzing and stuff of it, I'm like, oh boy, like this is we're getting in trouble here. But yeah, it's a damn good costume. Zangief is great. He's iconic. It's got the scar. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Gay Zangief bear. Just trying to make you feel uncomfortable. Sorry. Next one on the list, Halloween Colleen. This is probably my least favorite of the ones that I put here, and I'm tried to be faithful to my own feelings for most of this, but this is one that I think people really do like. And I do think it's well made. I just don't know how it really ties to the character. She has ice powers, a witch is more of like in the way of magic, and they might do some ice stuff, but I would imagine more fire.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
What about
she's
it?
She's an ice queen. Like she's an ice princess. Like, and she's a witch. She's the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The main antagonist in the first book. Like she's the.
You think that it's a Narnia callback?
I mean, it's like the Ice Witch is still a thing. You know, I mean, you could. That's probably giving Capcom too much credit, but like, there's at least a history of it. I love fantasy stuff and D&D and all that. So, but like to me, it makes sense also because I love the costume. And shout out to Kitty Kaboom when she cosplayed in that. And then I mean, it's a Colleen's gorgeous in that, so I'm a pretty big fan of it.
I think she looks a little better in a couple of other costumes in terms of that, but I do think this is a beautiful. Well, you're wrong, but that's okay. You're allowed to. You're wrong. It's my segment. But I will admit it does look good. I can appreciate why people like it, and I will at least give one spot on my list to one that I didn't go with my gut for, but I think there's an argument to be made that it's one of the best costumes. So there. The last one is, and I didn't have this on there, but I as I thought about it, I had to swap it out. It was going to be an honorable mentions, but it can't be because there's too much behind it. Juri is one of the most popular characters, and in modern times, when I post a lot of fighting game art to the front page. It's kind of one of the things that I like to do, and when I'm looking around for them, there are certain characters like Chun-Li, Morrigan, Mai, Cammy that pop up all the time, and Juri has very clearly joined them despite being a much younger character than most all of those. There are always artwork of Juri. People love the character. She has oftentimes whole collections that like artists they'll draw a bunch of characters, but they'll also do a bunch of Juri, just straight up Juri. And she's so beloved, and it's no reason, or it's no wonder why. She has a lot of personality. It's an enticing, attractive personality. She's got a lot of confidence, but she's sinister. She's able. She's got everything that you want. She can be the waifu, and she can be the villain. All of this stuff. And so her school costume imagines Juri as if she were in high school, and you think, well, there's enough personality here that I care, and that I would care to think about, okay, maybe also what's she going to be like in a few years, but even more so, what was she like on the road to getting to where she is now? And you think, like, if Juri were in high school, what kind of person, what table would she sit at? She's got goth, like, spiderweb stuff and a bunch of piercings and different color hair, and you're like, and like, does she have like Beetlejuice stockings, something like that? It's like, it's so perfectly what Juri would be at a younger stage, and it encapsulates that so well. I remember when it was first revealed, people really liked it. They're like, "Oh, that's so good," and it's for such a beloved character. Maybe not for her abilities in game, but certainly for her personality and for who she is as a Street Fighter character. She is just kind of like an overnight became on that just reached that same status as Chun-Li and Mai and Morgan in certain ways. She also has some proving to do just in the long term of having longevity and such, but Juri's beloved. This captures her identity, which is a very important part, perhaps the most important part of her as a character, and it imagines where she would be in high school, and I just think it's really well thought out and really well executed.
Yeah, I love it too. And so if you guys feel like John missed something that he should have hit, go ahead and just write in the comments below here and just tell him how bad he sucks.
I
Tell him
have
how bad
some
his gang
honorable
references are.
mentions.
Well, I don't even want you to get to those because it's just I want people to blow you up in the comments and blow me up. Well, this is my last episode, so I'm done. But so it doesn't matter if they blow me up or not. But anyway, but who are your honorable mentions?
Well, I also
John?
want to
What
ask
do
you,
got?
did I miss any obvious ones that you would have put on the list?
Felicia Manat.
Okay, so I do have Manat, and Felicia Manat is very close to Battle Manat, which is like Fifth Element. They're both basically wearing mummy tape, and it's just super sexualized. Whatever, everybody loves that. Fair enough. I just thought like, yeah, it's appreciated and up there, but I honorable mention. Anyone else?
Well, the thing about Felicia Manat is when I played at Capcom Cup, I overheard someone saying about my costume because I'm like, oh, hey, all the costumes are on here. I'm going to play it. They're like, that costume should be banned for how revealing it is. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, mission accomplished. That was exactly what I was going for because I want to distract the other player with how sexy my character is because that's half the goal. That's why you play female characters in these games. Like for some people, for me,
Well,
because it's like I need every dirty advantage I can get, and so I'm going to dress my character as scantily clad as I can get away with. There it is.
Flesh Pits Melina from MK9, right? So yeah, I have some honorable mentions. Mecha Abigail, that's definitely up there. It fits the character really well. It's pretty cool. Rose swimsuit. What do you like? Is that your favorite Rose costume of them all, or is that not your?
Yeah, it's my favorite. This one I use all the time, but I also like her dress from Alpha that they have as well. But yes.
Okay, so yeah, Rose swimsuit. Renaissance Gill. Renaissance Gill, I think, was the one that I had instead of. No, actually, it doesn't. But it's a fellow CPT costume actually. But Renaissance Gill, like I saw that and it's like, wait, who is that? What is that? It immediately got my brain wondering like a couple of questions and wanting to investigate more. Is like, is that Leonardo da Vinci, Leonardo DiCaprio, Renaissance? I don't know, but and as you go and you look at it, there's a bunch of little details to it. I thought they were really cool. So I just thought a well-made costume and one that makes you kind of think and expect a little bit more. Hot Ryu for the way it resonated and for what it did. I mean, it wasn't even initially called Hot Ryu, but it had such it got such a reaction from the fans that they deemed it that, and it kind of garnered that name just organically. Hippie G. It's one of the most recent costumes to come out. No one realized that they wanted Hippie G, and at first I didn't like, what does this have to do with the president? This has nothing to do with G as a character, but he is the president of the Earth. He draws his power from Earth, from Gaia, so that's kind of like a hippie, one in touch with nature and the Earth and stuff like that. So I get it, and it looks really cool. Like just the way it kind of glitz and gleams in the light. I don't know, something about it, but it's totally groovy, man. And then the other one is Honda's Halloween turtle demon. I know it's not a turtle. It's is it Tengu?
Kappa, right?
Kappa. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're
Kappa,
totally right. And again, it's just so perfect for Honda. I really think there's a lot of opportunity with the Halloween costumes to do this, to line these characters up with similar other entities that people can recognize. And the fact that he's a turtle character, it's just like, don't miss this opportunity. And I think they did it with him before in Street Fighter 4. They made him the turtle, and that was good too. But I think it's really cool. And then the way you can take off the helm or the head, and it's just like him in a costume like that, or you can see him through the beak, is a cute little touch to it too. So those are my honorable mentions. I think that's the last one. Yep. But otherwise, now you know.
Balrog. I love Gutsman Balrog because I love Mega Man. So it's
See,
that's one of my favorite costumes.
I didn't play much Mega Man in the day, so it didn't resonate with me in the same way. But yeah, I've seen a lot of love for Gutsman Balrog for sure.
All right, Josh. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for the Event Hubs podcast. Normally at this time I say thank you for listening, and we're going to be back with you soon, but both of us got canceled in this episode.
I'm done with all the canceling stuff. Whatever, bring it on.
So we won't be back with you soon, but thank you, I guess, for listening, and there it is.
See you guys.
All right, see ya.
Perfect.